Hi, Sen. Thank you so much for joining me on this podcast today. I love to start all my interviews by going to the very beginning of every single person's life. And during my research, I realized that you're ethnically Chinese, born in Vietnam as part of the Hoa people, and then you fled with your family after the Fall of Saigon in 1975. What is your earliest memory? Do you even remember growing up in Vietnam?
I remember a few things. I remember like my dad teaching me how to walk, holding my hands up. And I remember playing marbles with my siblings and my cousins. I remember I had a little puppy in Vietnam. And then the other things I remember is when we were leaving Vietnam, my grandfather had my brother on his back and he was riding a bike and there were some people shooting at him.
Oh
Uh,
no.
yeah. Back then, I thought maybe they were Vietnamese soldiers and they didn't want us to leave. But later, I found out from my mom that those were pirates and they stay along the shores. I remember getting onto a boat and there were a lot of people. One time, I had to use the restroom while on the boat. And my parents told me apparently I almost fell through the hole in the back where,
Oh no.
yeah, apparently someone grabbed me and held me. I didn't think it was real until after some time they introduced me to someone. They're like, this is Uncle someone. He's the guy who grabbed you when you almost fell off the boat. And I was like, oh, that was actually real. They weren't just joking with me and teasing me.
I'm sure the
So
uncle remembered you forever as well.
yeah, yeah. But when we left Vietnam and we went to Hong Kong, we lived in some refugee camp. The whole area was fenced off. Behind us, there was like a mountainous area. We would climb over the fence, which seemed like 100 feet tall back then, since I was only like 4 or 5 years old. And we would wander around in the woods and slide down the hills. There were some trees with vines, and we would grab on the vine and swinging around. It was a lot of fun. I remember one time we were swinging on these vines, and then some policemen were looking at us and screaming and go, "Hey kids, you gotta get out of there."
How
Um,
did your family end up going from Hong Kong to the US?
I think we were only in Hong Kong for a few years, and then we came to the US. I remember we were on a truck, and we got onto an airplane, and my younger brother, I think he asked my dad, what happens if we're all the way up there and we fall off the airplane? And yeah, it was an adventure. It was my first time on an airplane.
Was
Um,
it hard to assimilate into the culture? It must have been very different from when you grew up in Hong Kong.
I think when we first got to the US, I was very surprised by color. I would see Americans and I'm just looking at their hair colors. I'm like, whoa, there are people with red hair. There are people with brown hair, yellow hair. I look at their eyes and I'm like, whoa, these people have blue eyes, gray eyes. I've never seen a black person before. And even black people were very interesting because some black people have red hair, some black people have yellow hair. And I was just constantly surprised by all the colors around.
Did your love of wushu, did that start when you were in the States or when you were in Hong Kong? How did that come about?
I think in Hong Kong, I remember going to drive-in theaters. I remember seeing kung fu movies back then, but it wasn't until we came to the US in Sacramento. There's a video store nearby us, and our parents would rent all these movies and series.
That's
So
where your friend Bobby's parents ran. Is that the one?
yeah, so my friend Bobby, he owns a video store. I would go over there and rent Hong Kong movies and Hong Kong TV series. Like 30 episodes, and we would binge watch them over the weekend with our parents and just stay up all night. So that's when I first kind of fell in love with Hong Kong movies and Hong Kong TV series in general.
And then you
Um,
also wanted to practice just like Jet Li and Jackie Chan were as well.
yeah, yeah. My parents put me and my siblings into Chinese school. After school, they have someone who teaches martial arts. My siblings and I and my cousin, we all joined, and we didn't really care about Chinese school. We were in there mostly for the martial arts because it was fun. The guy who taught us, he was teaching us like Shaolin Temple martial arts, and his students would come by and they would do flips and all kinds of crazy things. And we were like, man, This
Just
is
like the
amazing.
movies.
Except you're seeing it in real life, which is even more impressive. So that's when my siblings and I started learning it. And even back then in the US, every Friday they would have the martial arts movie. And then eventually from Friday, it moved to Saturday noontime. So we would watch all those and we would practice it on each other. And we would go to Chinese school and ask our Sifu about all these techniques and things like that. Eventually, I think we also had someone who taught us Wing Chun, which is like Yin Man back then. And yeah, I was like, hey, isn't this the martial arts that Bruce Lee also practiced? And back then, we were huge Bruce Lee fans. And one of those things growing up in the US is you don't see many Asian superstars in a movie. So that's maybe our way of connecting to our culture, I guess. And it's also great seeing someone who looks like you in the movies and as a movie star.
Was it a
Uh,
conscious thought, the whole, oh, I don't really see any people who look like me who are in the movies?
wasn't a conscious thought. It's just something that we gravitated towards. Our parents, they still listen to Chinese songs, Chinese singers. Growing up in the 80s, I was huge fans of all the action stars back then, like Stallone and Arnold and Bruce Willis. And I was also huge fans of Jackie Chan and Jet Li and Donnie Yen back then.
Clearly, you love Hong Kong movies. You can
Mm.
definitely speak the language. You've already been to Hong Kong and you also loved filmmaking. Did it not cross your mind? Maybe once I graduate from high school, I could move to Hong Kong.
Oh, I did went to Hong Kong a few times and I do want to stay there for a long time just to experience the whole, culture and watching movie premieres and all that. Unfortunately, as Hong Kong movies were gaining popularity in the US, I think in Hong Kong itself, the industry was like dying.
And the mafia had control of it as well, I believe.
Yeah, yeah.
Right.
Like movie stars were cranking out like 14 movies a year, you
Was it
know.
like Jet Li's agent who was shot because he refused to do a film?
Something like that. There were rumors. I think during one of the interviews, I asked him about it, and their reply was like, "You've been watching too many Hong Kong movies. We don't know anything about that." Yeah,
Yeah.
but you do read about it, and there must be some truth to it. And even someone like Anthony Wong mentioned how, he survived that period where he said like, "Hey, what are you gonna do when, a triad member comes to you and say, you make these movies or you we shoot your family?" I've seen enough Jackie Chan movies where he's like, he appears in the beginning of the movie for 2 minutes and then he'll appear in the middle for 2 minutes and he'll appear at the end for 2 minutes. I'm like, hey, what's up with that? So some of it makes sense, I'm like, maybe this is one of those movies where he has a gun at his head.
We will
Yeah,
never know.
well, yeah.
I wonder, clearly you have such a clear love for these things. Why did you end up doing computer science at Berkeley? That seems completely left field from your interests.
Oh, I was always more like artistic. Whenever I have free time when I was little, I would do drawings, sometimes comic book type of drawings, but a lot of it more on realism. I really love Renaissance art, like Leonardo da Vinci, the four Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. So I grew up liking art. I always have art projects that I would work on, but I'm also good at math. So after high school, my dad's like, hey, you're good at drawing, you're good at math, maybe you should pursue civil engineering or architecture.
The standard
Yeah.
career paths.
So that's when I got to Berkeley, I was thinking architecture. Back then, it was the beginning of the internet. In one of the classes, they said, well, instead of us creating a portfolio, why don't we create a website and put our work on a website? And that's when I started learning. A roommate was a CS major, electrical engineering and computer science. And some of my friends living next to me were doing computer science. So I was doing art at the time, and one of my buddies, Lyle Fong, who also likes art and was a computer science major, he introduced me to Photoshop. He's like, hey, you should really try out Photoshop. You can do all this cool stuff with it. And so I started playing around with Photoshop. and then learning HTML and build a website. And then I'm like, oh, maybe I should take a computer science class just to learn a little bit more about programming. So I took one, but I didn't really major in it. I took one computer science class, and then I started getting into computer animation. And so that's what I did in college.
Seemed almost like a perfect fit, right? Because I read at the time in Berkeley, multimedia design firms that were very popular back then for the students as well.
Oh yeah, yeah, because back then Toy Story kind of came out a little bit later. 3D computer animation was becoming really popular. We were doing these 3D modeling of, buildings and structures and whatnot, but we found out that the departments with software to do this stuff is actually not all in the architecture. Sometimes they're in these really tiny departments that I wouldn't think would need something like soft image back then, which is like the gold standard for computer animation. Our architecture professor would be like, "Oh yeah, this guy in this department has a soft image, and you can go over there and use it." And we would sneak into the building. There's one person's office, and we're just there using his computer to create 3D animations.
Did you have a clear view then of what you were going to do after college?
Not really. I was thinking more. I wanted to be a animator, computer animator. I wanted to work for like Pixar. I even submitted a portfolio and video to them.
Yeah,
Like
they were
this.
going around the campuses as well, getting people to sign up.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. I didn't realize that. Hey, you should actually go to their website and see if they have an opening. I just sent my portfolio and my video to them and thinking, oh yeah, they're gonna look at this, and boom, I just sent something, just found their address and just sent them a video.
How did you figure out then after Berkeley, what were you going to do? What happened to you?
So my co-founders of Rotten Tomatoes, Patrick Lee and Stephen Wong. Stephen Wong was in the CS program. He's a real programmer. He had actually started a web design company while he was a student during the later years. And he was actually building some websites. We're like in our senior year, and Patrick was like, hey, we should do something together. He wanted to create a company where all of his friends can work together since we hang out all the time anyway. So he met with Steven, and the internet was popular back then. And he's like, hey, why don't we start an internet company? So he and Steven started an internet company. Then Patrick got some investment from his parents to start it. And then he knew I was into art and computer graphics and knew how to build a website. So he and Steven approached me and said, hey, why don't you become our art director? I'm like, yeah, sure. It was senior year, didn't really have a job back then. And I sent a video to Pixar, didn't get a response. So I'm like, yeah, sure.
It must have been a little bit difficult as well because you were dreaming of becoming a Pixar animator. Then
Yeah.
when you start working with them, the initial work was for motherboard manufacturer, which is not
Oh,
the most
yeah.
exciting thing.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, we were all into computers. Like my friend Lyle Fong, who introduced me to Photoshop, he and Patrick also started a company selling computer parts. So they got me into computers, and even just being around them, I knew how to put a computer together and buy all the separate parts, the motherboards. So just by being around them, I knew how to put together a computer. So building websites for computers were actually kind of exciting back then.
It must have been even more exciting when you managed to onboard Disney as well.
Oh yeah, yes.
I heard there
So
was a story where you had to come together over a weekend over a pizza party to create a website.
oh right, yeah. We done work for some motherboard companies. And Patrick had contact with one of these motherboard companies, Larry Barber. His daughter at the time works for the Disney Channel website, and one of the vendors had left, so they were looking for someone else to kind of fill that void. So Stephen, Patrick, and we drove to Vegas because I think there was a computer show there and we were going to meet him. We drove down 8 or 9 hours down to Vegas. We talked to him, and he's like, "Yeah, build something and show us. Yeah, send it to my daughter." We came back and then we got a few more friends and we're like, hey, this is Disney Channel. What do you think they can use? And we've seen the Mighty Duck movies and we check out their website. There's a million Mighty Ducks movies. So why don't we create a website for them and create some games? So we spent that entire weekend, which isn't much. We already spent most of it on going to Vegas and coming back. And we just pulled like all-nighters and we just built the entire website, built a hockey game just during that weekend. And then we called them up on Monday and like, hey, here's what we have. They looked at it, they were impressed enough. They're like, oh, we already have a Mighty Ducks website, but we don't have a game. How much do you want for that game? I think back then the biggest contract we had was like a few $1,000s. And they're like, how about 10 grand? We're like, whoa, 10 grand. We spent a lot more time building something for a lot less. So we were like, wow, okay, yeah, sure. Yeah, 10 grand, that's a good one.
So that must
That's,
have blew your mind, 10 grand just
yeah.
for this weekend's work. This is something.
Yeah, yeah, it did blow our mind. We were like, well, how many hours did we work on this? When we added the hours, we were like, man, that's insane amount of money for such a short amount of time. It made us realize that, hey, we charging by the hour is probably not a good thing. We should probably charge by the project. We'll build your game for 10 grand or 20 grand or whatever amount and just kind of like give them a package for a certain amount rather than just counting the hours.
So you figured out, okay, someone like Disney is willing to pay at least 10 grand. This is something I want to go in. How do you find more work?
Patrick would be a better person to ask for this, but after that, they gave us more projects and more websites. And I think one of the things is being young and being in our 20s, we have insane amount of energy and insane amount of time because we don't have kids, we don't have other responsibilities. We never miss a deadline. We always deliver. And when there's a deadline, we would just pull all-nighters and do whatever to get the job done. We thought we would pay a lot of money for it, but to them, they said, yeah, you guys are quick and cheap, and you guys do a great job, and that's a good combination. And we've done a lot more and more projects for them. They had vendors who missed deadlines. One of the huge vendors missed like a huge deadline for them. And they're like, well, these guys have never missed a deadline. They've always been quick. Their quality's been great, and they're really fast. So they started giving us more work, and eventually we became kind of indispensable to them. And they're like, well, we better sign you guys to yearly contracts. And so with these yearly contracts, there's a lot more stability.
$1 million contract for 2 years, something like that.
Yeah, yeah, something like, yeah.
That must have been
So
really exciting. I read that one of the big projects was also DisneyChannel.com. You also created that as well.
I think mainly Disney Channel. And back then, Shockwave, back then, JavaScript isn't as huge as it is right now. It was really popular, especially with Disney. I never thought I would use things that I picked up in animation classes again. So we were doing a lot of interactive websites with animation and a lot of interactivity.
Did you feel like you were living the dream? This is exactly what you want to be doing.
Kind of, but then we also worked a lot of hours because it was a startup and we didn't know any better. There's no work-life balance because we were so young.
Back then.
Yeah, there's no such term. We do like it, but at the same time, I think back then when you work a lot of hours, just feel a little bit drained from time to time.
I wonder, you keep saying worked really, really hard, feeling really drained. How did you find the energy to run your own hobby project, which eventually became Rotten Tomatoes?
Yeah, that's a good question. It was really being such a huge fan of Jackie Chan and reading about how he had back then tried to break into Hollywood in the early 80s and wasn't able to succeed. Hearing that, oh, he's going to try to break into Hollywood again, got me excited. He made Wumbo in the Bronx, and Wumbo in the Bronx was released in the US and it became a hit. And so they started bringing other Jackie Chan movies over, and I started reading reviews of them because I was just curious. His films have like very simple stories. A lot of it is humor and action. I was curious how critics would receive him here. And surprisingly, they like his films, and they really like the creativity in his choreography. And I'm like, if I'm spending all this time reading all these reviews of his films, maybe other people who are huge fans might also be interested in doing this. And
And it
also,
wasn't easy, right? The reviews, you had to actually go physically to a library to find these reviews.
I think early on, for newer films, you can find them on the internet. But for older films, when we try to cover older films like Star Wars, for instance, the only way you can find reviews of Star Wars back then was going to the library and you're looking through film of old newspapers. Yeah, so that took a lot of work.
Imagine
Um,
so. But your love of Jackie Chan came to the forefront, and even though you were working crazy hours, I suppose you
yeah,
felt this inner drive. You had to just do it.
yeah. I feel like, oh man, I'm such a huge fan of his. I want him to succeed. So I took that opportunity and I'm like, well, I know how to create a website. This is in the early days of the internet. And during the days before the internet, you have to go to the magazine store and one of their newspaper racks and go through the newspaper and flip through them to find reviews. Every weekend, I noticed there were all these ads for movies. And every movie, no matter how good or bad, will have critics saying how great it is. I've seen some pretty bad movies, and I'm just like, there's no way this movie is that good. So that gave me the idea, hey, I should just create a website, pattern it after these movie ads, have quotes, but not just the good ones, but also the bad ones.
Where were the bad ones coming from?
The bad reviews from other film critics. Yeah.
Mm.
So the studios would never put a bad quote on their movie ad, but I was thinking, well, we can give them a true critical reception by including the good and bad reviews.
What kept you going? Because you started out of a love for Jackie Chan. Oh, it sounds almost like a tribute to Jackie Chan. After
Yeah.
that movie came out, you didn't have to continue. So why did you keep doing these movies and going back and doing other archived movies as well?
In general, I just like the idea and the reaction from fans. I even received comments from other people who said, "Hey, I have this exact idea. I'm glad you did it. Keep it going. I come to your website every week now." And I'm like, wow, great, because growing up, one of the things that I do on a weekly basis is watch Cisco and Ebert, and they have a weekly show. They review films coming out every week.
Thumbs up, thumbs down.
Yeah, thumbs up, thumbs down. And then every Monday, I would look at the box office to see what kind of films are popular with audiences. This seems to be another weekly thing that I feel like people would like to do. So that kind of got me going. Plus, I'm also curious because I also like going out and watching movies. I'm also curious to see how all these opening films are doing and which films I should watch.
Yeah, you don't want to waste your time being stuck in the cinema watching a terrible show.
Yeah. And I was spending all my time gathering reviews.
And all that time meant that you had to be working overnight as well, multiple times, right?
Oh yeah,
Thursdays.
yeah. So I was already spending a lot of hours doing actual work with our company and doing a lot of work with Disney Channel. And so doing this on the side, it was mainly on some Tuesday nights and mostly Thursdays when movies come out. They come out on Fridays, but the reviews come out on Thursday night. So critics would publish the reviews on Thursday night. So then I would spend the whole night just gathering all these reviews. Back then, every week there's like, I don't know, 3 to 10 movies coming out, including wide releases and limited releases.
And
So
how
I would
many
do
reviews were you collecting per movie?
like around 50. So I was spending all night just going through all these reviews. And before I know it, it would be like 6 a.m. in the morning. And then a few more hours, it's time to work. Sometimes during meetings, I would just nod off. Patrick and Stevens, they were like, you look really tired.
I
Um,
imagine that they might have over time started to notice and go, hang on, why is it that you're no longer as committed to what we're doing? Were there difficult conversations that came up?
Yeah, just working long hours and running Rotten Tomatoes on the side really drained me and took a toll on me. And they noticed, especially certain Wednesdays and a lot of Fridays, I'm just a walking zombie, essentially. had a talk with me. And after that talk, it's like, okay, maybe I should take a break because I'm working way too many hours and spending way too much time and just on Rotten Tomatoes and just got burnt out. So I stopped, agreed that I would take a break, and then I left my position, and then I moved back to Sacramento and I stopped updating Rotten Tomatoes.
So it was a complete stop with everything that you were doing.
Yeah, I complete stop because
That
I
must have been scary though.
it was scary, but at the same time, it was during like Christmas break. I also had some time to rest and think about everything. But during that time, I was looking at my emails and I got all these messages from fans of the site. They were like, "Hey, how come you're not updating anymore? Please don't stop." Just getting that response from them made me feel like, oh, I gotta keep this going.
But then you
Uh,
also decided to try filmmaking as well.
oh yeah, yeah. So then I contacted my high school buddies, Ben No and Bobby Lee. Bobby Lee's the guy who owns the video store. I'm like, hey, you guys want to help me out with this website? And they were like, yeah, sure. So we would work on the website, and Ben and I try to come up with a script. And we were like, we should make it like a Hong Kong movie. We'll just make it as we go. And so I bought a camera, and every day we would come up with random things and would start shooting it. Eventually, it went nowhere.
It was
Because
bad.
yeah, because we were just making it up as we went. Yeah, that's not a good way. Even though it worked with Hong Kong movies, it didn't work with us because we had no goal in mind other than, hey, let's go and make a movie without even thinking like, hey, what kind of movie should we make?
So you were taking a break. You tried
Yeah.
filmmaking, did not work. What were you
Mhm.
going to do with your life?
When Bobby and Ben were helping me with the website, we kept it going and it was gaining traffic. There were more and more users. And Patrick and Steven were still hosting the website.
Ebert also mentioned it as well.
Oh, yeah, Ebert, yeah. While we were in Sacramento, it actually got some acclaim. The San Francisco Chronicle, which is the paper for the Bay Area, had written an article about us and had interviewed us, saying how innovative the website was. And USA Today also mentioned it. So it was getting some acclaim. And then Roger Ebert back then was also writing for Yahoo Internet Life, a magazine. And Yahoo was the biggest website back then. And they also had a magazine, and Ebert was writing for it. He wrote an article about these are my favorite movie websites, and Rotten Tomatoes was mentioned. And during that summer, Blair Witch Project came out, and it was a huge phenomenon back then, especially online. And it drove our traffic really, really high. And shortly after that, The Phantom Menace came out, George Lucas's first prequel. So that received a lot of traffic, that received a lot of attention. And Steven was looking at the site and he noticed the traffic was spiking. So then he told Patrick about it, and Patrick's like, why don't you come back with us and we should form two companies. We will have our design company and we'll work together on Rotten Tomatoes and you can focus on Rotten Tomatoes. And I'm like, okay, sure.
You
So
weren't
like,
hesitant. You weren't thinking, oh, but this is my baby. I don't want to share it.
Hey guys, just interrupting this episode to say that if you like what you're hearing on this episode, feel free to let me know at solismywife@gmail.com. Feedback is always welcome and invaluable, especially when figuring out what other content and individuals to feature. And if you're a brand or a corporation and you would like to explore partnering with us at CME, email me as well at solismywife@gmail.com and let's try to make this work.
You
so
weren't
like,
hesitant. You weren't thinking, oh, but this is my baby. I don't want to share it.
I definitely know that I don't have the business skills and the personality to be able to take that and turn it into something bigger. Whereas Patrick and Steven are way more well-spoken than I am. You got the worst spoken of us.
I got the real story.
Yeah. But Patrick and Steven are better at putting together a company, getting people to come together to turn something like this into something that's more than a hobby. Because back then it still looked like a hobby website.
So, what were some of the things you did to ensure it didn't look like a hobby by an actual company, What were the big changes?
When we decided to focus on Rotten Tomatoes, Patrick and Steven went out and spoke to a bunch of investors. They were clients, they were friends of clients, connections from our clients. They were able to raise, I think, about over $1 million so that we can actually put that money and focus on Rotten Tomatoes back then. We got some people from our design company to come over and focus on Rotten Tomatoes and redesign the website. I think one thing that made it look like something that's bigger than just a hobby site was when Steven took the content that we had, because back then we manually coded every page. We only had coverage of like a few hundred movies. There was another website called the Movie Review Query Engine. They gathered links to movie reviews. So Steven's like, well, why don't we take that and connect it with the movie quotes and the aggregated rating that you have, connect all those links together, then we can cover a lot more movies. Because of the funding that we raised, we also licensed a movie database, which has information about films like directors, cast and crew, film synopsis for hundreds of thousands of movies. So he hooked all that together with what we manually collected. But when we first looked at it, we're like, wow, instead of just a website with just a few hundred movies, it's a website with a few 100,000 movies. So now it seems like you can actually go to the website and search for a movie and have information on it. If there are reviews about it, the reviews also come up. So that's when it looked like much bigger than just a hobby website.
I can't help but wonder, because I'm an IP lawyer, as you were talking about all these things. The first thought that came to mind was all these synopses, the data, the images, those are all copyrighted by major movie studios. Did you not have legal queries coming going, hang on, you're using our things, then monetizing it by selling to others?
I think the questions that we get a lot about copyright was from film critics who say, hey, do you have the rights to, because we would pull these quotes from them.
Yeah,
And
and they
they're
are
like,
copyrighted, yes.
yeah, but the thing is, it's kind of a gray area. You can have quotes or something, and depending on the length.
Yeah, it's very
So
subjective every single
yeah,
time.
yeah, there is a gray area about that. Surprisingly, with film studios, they would actually give you all this content, all these movie stills, synopsis, production notes, bios from the movie stars or the people behind the camera. They willingly give you all this stuff if you use it to promote their movies. They give it to you for free as long as you're covering their movies. And of course, if you're using their materials, you're covering the movies. But the film synopsis, the database that we license, so you can actually license this information. Back then, we used a company called Muse. They were able to gather all this information and we paid them a monthly fee to be able to use it. But the film studios don't really have an issue with you using all that stuff because they know when you're using it, you're promoting their movies.
And the film critics never really raised a big issue.
Yeah, because we were driving a lot of traffic to their websites. So,
It
you
was a
know,
symbiosis.
yeah, yeah, some of them were like, hey, what can we do to make this process easier and quicker for you guys? Because they see the traffic that's coming to them.
Yeah. So what was it like building that relationship with the film critics? Because they are the ones that are the reason you exist in the first place.
Yeah, to me, I always feel like they're the stars of the website. The editorial team, most of them are communicating with the film critics and constantly contacting them. If there are film reviews that we're not sure about, like if is this a positive review or is this a negative review, we will contact them about it. And I always try to build tools that I think they would like. If I were them, what would I like to see on the page? I'm like, well, maybe a picture. Everyone likes to see a picture of them. So
A
then I
profile
started
for
with,
themselves.
yeah, a profile for them. And then on their page, we'll list all their reviews. We will show kind of like a sampling of how they rate movies. What's a 4-star review? What's a 3-star movie? What's a 2-star movie? What's a 1-star movie? And then we would have interesting statistics on their page, like this critic agrees with the Tomatometer, like this percentage of the time.
And they
Yeah.
loved it.
Yeah, the greatest thing was I'll hear them talk about, hey, check this out. I agree with the tomato meter. 85% of the time, you don't have to go to Rotten Tomatoes anymore. You can just read me.
I love it. And the Tomatometer, that's your brainchild as well. How did that come about?
Originally, I was thinking, oh, for every film review, a fresh rating is like a red tomato. A negative rating is like a green splat. So originally I was thinking, well, if we just list all the reviews on that page, they can instantly see by, the amount of red or green how bad the movie is. At the time, each movie I was only collecting about 50 reviews. So you can see the whole list of reviews on one page. Years later, we're collecting like 200 something or 300 reviews per movie. So we can't display all that on one page anymore. You would have to paginate through them. And sometimes on the homepage, even if the movie's bad, you might see more good reviews on the first page. So that's when we're like, okay, we got to show a meter here so that the users can instantly see what the actual rating is.
How do you give a weightage though? Because when you read the reviews, it could sound good, it could sound bad, but what's the number? How do you attach that?
A lot of it is based on the rating they give on their own site. A lot of film critics, they have a like either a 4-star rating system, like 5-star rating system, or sometimes thumbs up or thumbs down rating system. So a lot of times we would rely on that. The only tricky part is like if someone gives a movie 2.5 stars out of 4, is that good or is that bad? And sometimes it's bad, sometimes it's good. Sometimes critics would say like, oh yeah, 2.5 out of 4 for me would always be positive, marginally positive. And some critics would be like 2.5, it could go either way. Some of them say, I'll leave it up to you.
I wonder at what point, because when you said Patrick and Stephen came and said, let's work together, we're going to run both at the same time. At one point, they decided to let go of Design Reactor. Do you remember that period? It must have been a bit scary as well because you were working with big companies like Disney and they were letting all
Oh
that
yeah.
go.
Yeah, some of our investors are like, what the heck are you guys thinking? Going into a brand new thing and where you have this company with huge clients. Why are you giving all that away? Back then, when we had too much work, we would contract out to another design company, development company. Patrick, Steven, and I, we didn't think that we could do both companies at the same time and have both of them be successful. So they're like, we gotta focus on one. So then we decided to focus on Rotten Tomatoes because back then it was shortly before the internet bubble. So there were a lot of internet startups back then. People were throwing a lot of money on a lot of startups, and it seems like any startup was able to get a lot of investment and whatnot. So we were thinking about writing that way. We pretty much told everyone you're now working for Rotten Tomatoes, and then we told our clients that we would hand off their work to a spin-off. That vendor that we use, we gave them all our projects. We still kept a some stake in the company. Initially, it was kind of rough for them too because they weren't used to working like for all of us. We didn't think twice about pulling all-nighters and whatnot. When there's a deadline, we'll meet it. So when we first handed off the work to our vendor, they were having issues, and our clients they call us up. They're like, "Hey, what's going on? You guys have never missed a deadline." We actually had to go in and do some work and make sure that our clients were happy, and then jump back to Rotten Tomatoes. But the initial investment, it wasn't that scary. When the internet bubble burst, shortly afterwards, that was when it got scary.
Yeah. Just before we talk about the internet bubble burst, I wonder when you were raising funds, what you've heard of it as well, since Patrick was leading it, you would hear people laughing just at hearing the name Rotten Tomatoes. And you were in the time where the old school publicists hated internet, I believe, at the time. So what you were doing was very much against what they would want.
Yeah, I think a lot because the internet was fairly new. A lot of film critics didn't know what to think about it because most of the film critics back then worked for newspapers. I think one of the few who were really forward thinking and who were really receptive of the internet was Roger Ebert. He's like one of the few. But the other film critics were more weary of it and they're not quite sure. there was definitely a divide between film critics who work for, the print media like magazines and newspapers, and film critics who work solely for the internet. I think when Ben and I attended some film screenings, the publicists, they treated us like second-class citizens. We would walk in, they would like greet these print critics or TV critics or radio critics. They were like, "Oh, Mr. Blah, blah, here's your seat." They would walk them to the seat and make them feel like film stars. But with Ben and I, they were like, whatever seats you can find, you can go grab them. We're like, "Hey, isn't this section reserved for film media?" So they definitely let us online people feel like we didn't belong.
But you
So
felt like there was something here in the internet, regardless of how these people felt, that kept you
yeah,
going.
yeah, yeah, definitely, definitely. And the thing is, our company was named Rotten Tomatoes. I didn't realize it until later, but our CFO told us, "Hey, I'm not going to work for a company named Rotten Tomatoes. So you gotta, call us something more respectable." And I was like, okay. And now I always wonder why, hey, how come we have a parent company named Ink Fusion? People do find it amusing, but at the same time, it's also memorable and
Respectable now.
yeah, we respectable now. Like I remember when Ben and we went to Canada once and we wore a Rotten Tomatoes t-shirt and someone would just stop him and go, "Hey, what's Rotten Tomatoes?" Because it's kind of an odd thing. Is this a software company? And we're like, no, no, it's a movie website. And then
And
gave
then your
them the
Rotten Tomatoes is a red tomato.
yeah, yep. So yeah, people definitely thought, oh, they did such a good job with their web development company. They can probably turn Rotten Tomatoes into something big. A lot of the investment was probably based on our reputation with the web development company.
So in hindsight, it's always good to give your best no matter what, because it will
Yeah,
affect what
yep,
you do in the future.
yep,
You mentioned the bubble bursting. This happened 2 months after you closed your fundraising round.
yeah, yeah.
You guys must have freaked out.
Yeah, we were super lucky because not only did we secure our initial investment, we actually also secure a few really big advertising contracts. That were,
MySimon.com.
yeah, mysimon.com. So luckily we got those secure. And after the bubble burst, we were able to rely on our investment and that contract. And my Simon was huge. I think CNET bought in for like $700 million back then. So they had a lot of money to play with. In fact, we weren't big enough that even after the bubble burst, even after they were laying people off, they didn't really notice us. They were like, okay, let's keep it low profile. Let's hope they don't notice that they still have this contract with us and,
Just keep
not
paying.
paying, keep paying us.
At the same time, while you had this contract on, you also had around 25 people, but eventually they did notice you.
Oh yeah, our CFO let us know that, hey, things aren't looking that great. If you don't do something based on the amount of revenue that's coming in and the amount of money that we have left, we would only last this long. So Patrick made a difficult decision to, instead of pulling off the Band-Aid slowly, just pull off the Band-Aid really quickly. And that's what we did. We gathered everyone together and we told them honestly, like, hey, this is what's going on. This is how much we have. We hire like our friends back then. So
Which
it was
must
kind
have
of,
made it even harder, I
yeah,
imagine.
yeah. Luckily, Patrick's the one who has to break the news to them. I just kind of sit there for support.
Yeah. I remember hearing Patrick describing one interview that you guys were like a family.
Yeah, I think because we were honest about it, they're like, yeah, we understand. It wasn't that bad.
So in hindsight, do you think it was done right? Because normally when people run a startup, the whole laying off is the most difficult part.
In hindsight, I definitely think Patrick made the right move because if
Mm,
we didn't do it, we wouldn't have last
yeah.
with what amount of money we had left. Because even after we did the layoffs, eventually Patrick and Paul, who was our marketing person back then, Paul Lee, both of them ended up not taking a salary. Maybe he was just taking half salary, and Patrick ended up living in the office to cut down costs, and he also wasn't taking salary. He said like, hey, one of my uncles made a really good investment, made some money and gave every family member some money and he got a small bit of money and he's like, I can survive on this. I'm just gonna go without pay for a little bit. Paul and Stephen were only taking half pay. And I think I was taking half pay too. I think the only people we were paying were our two editors and the CFO.
I wonder what kept you guys going because you hadn't figured out a proper monetization strategy. When you started Rotten Tomatoes, you said before you only wanted to run it for 3 years. This was way beyond 3 years. So
Oh
what was
yeah.
it?
Well, the great thing is we were all friends, and so even though things look kind of bleak, we were all still having fun because we're working on a movie website. We hang out together most of the time anyway. So it was like we were sharing the misery. We
I'm
weren't,
miserable, but I'm not alone.
yeah, exactly. We're miserable, but not alone. Even though we weren't making much money back then, we saw that we were gaining traffic, we were gaining users. Things were moving up, even though the monetization wasn't going up at the time. But eventually, as the internet companies became more stable, revenue started coming in again. And we eventually made enough that we eventually hired a sales guy named Evan Coet, who worked for, I think it was like AOL. AOL was super huge back then. So we were able to get him and work with him to actually figure out how to monetize the site. And he had some existing contacts with the film studios. This is mostly Patrick, Steven, and Evan, their department. So I'm mostly speaking from the outside. They're able to figure out how to get recurring revenue and advertising from the film studios. So our revenue was growing and our traffic was growing. Even though things were bleak, we were able to see the light in the tunnel.
I wonder what were the major turning points when you realized that actually we're going to survive?
I think as Evan, Patrick, and Steven were able to get more film studios on board and signing contracts with recurring revenue. Recurring revenue, that was very stabilizing. Seeing the site referenced by media on a regular basis. People were constantly quoting the site on a weekly basis, like, oh, these films came out, here's how they're rated on Rotten Tomatoes. Some newspapers even carry our ratings on a weekly basis. No,
Respectable newspapers.
yeah, respectable newspapers. Newspapers were actually a thing back then,
And
right when,
then 2003 Google AdSense turned on and you were one of 50 partners chosen.
oh yeah, that was huge. One of the sites that we get a lot of traffic from was from the IMDb. That's one of the things that we did back then. For every movie, they have a review section where they link to like film critics. We would also submit our link to them, and that's how we get some of our traffic from them. But when Google became huge, because of how often the print media reference us on a weekly basis, and because Google's algorithm is based on how many people link to you and who links to you and the quality of the links. So these weekly mentions went really well in Google. And so we ended up getting a huge amount of traffic from Google. And before that, our main source of traffic was from Yahoo and IMDb. When Google became huge, they became our major source of revenue, source of traffic.
Did that mean that you have to change the way that you were running Rotten Tomatoes to cater to this new source of traffic?
I don't think we were mainly just focused on Google. We were just mainly focused on doing link trades, contacting websites and telling them, if you link to me, I'll link to you. But eventually going a bit more beyond that, like, hey, I think this would be really interesting, to put on your website. Or sometimes we would contact mainly print media and giving them interesting stats about films based on the Tomatometer. And some of them would think it's interesting enough to do an article on. And then they would write an article and then they'll reference us. And Google would pick it up.
You were getting yourself out there, you were appearing in newspapers, people were mentioning you. Jon Stewart also had to explain Rotten Tomatoes to his guests as well. So definitely getting a lot of traction. even on late night. I
Mhm.
wonder, surely people will have noticed this and gone, oh, this is an interesting business. I can copy you too. There must have been hundreds of other people just like you. How do you think Rotten Tomatoes managed to rise above everyone else?
Regarding John Stewart, Steven and a lot of people who worked on Rotten Tomatoes are huge fans of his. There were a few who try to, I wouldn't say copy us, because I realized later that, hey, even before us, there's the film review query engine. They collect reviews on the internet. They didn't quite do it the same way we do it. I remember there was a website who just copied our entire look and feel, and we did contacted them and we did send our lawyers on them.
CND.
Yeah, and then they shut it down.
But how do you think you rose above everyone's? Because ultimately, at the end of the day, you were collecting movie reviews, which in a way
Yeah,
many people could have done.
I think maybe it's just the odd branding and it's also simple to understand. Thumbs up, thumbs down. How many people like this movie? There's no super complicated Google algorithm. And it's also kind of quirky and unique.
So it's so interesting, right? Nowadays, we talk about branding so much, but back then, it seems almost intuitive that you did the right branding.
Yeah, it was purely by accident. We just kind of just do this. I'll call it Rotten Tomatoes because I wasn't able to register any kind of domain name with like movies or film, and they were all already taken. I was just thinking no one would name their company or website Rotten Tomatoes.
The big next chapter, obviously, is that you sold to IGN. Before that, you were getting lots of queries from people asking, are you interested in selling? And internally, you came out with the number of no less than 6 million. How did that number come about?
It was enough to pay back our investors, and it was kind of like the baseline. It was an amount where our investors would at least break even. Back then, a lot of investors lost a lot of money after the internet bubble. So the break even, they would be really happy about.
You said before, in hindsight, we sold too early to IGN. Why do you say that?
I think Patrick said that, but I think in hindsight, yeah, we did so kind of early. If we kept it on later, we probably could have sold it for a lot more. But at the time, our investors, a lot of them lost money. We also went through like two startups back to back. So it was like, maybe it's time to take a break.
And did anything actually change for you personally? I mean, being able to exit is the dream for most people, and you managed to do that.
It's funny because the first thing I did was I'll buy a house for my parents, right? I think a lot of people, if they came from a poor family or poor background, the first thing in their mind when they make a lot of money is, oh, I'm gonna give my parents a house.
Yeah. I wonder when IGN bought, then Patrick negotiated to not be tied to them and he went straight to China. You decided to stay on. Did you have an idea of what you wanted to do?
Yes, we did two startups back to back, so I didn't want to do another one after that. I just want to kind of kick back a little bit and see the company through. We just rode that internet bubble, and now that it's bought by a big company and it's super stable, I should probably just stay and try to do the whole work-life balance. Try to go to work at 9 a.m. and punch out at 6 p.m. and focus on my personal life. The whole internet exploding, China's economy was going gangbusters. Patrick and Steven thought, hey, maybe China would be a lot of fun. So they decided to do that. I
But
was like,
Daniel Wu,
I didn't really know Daniel Wu, but Daniel Wu was a friend of theirs. And
he was also in the Wushu Club.
yeah, he was also in the Wushu Club. I saw Daniel a few times during Patrick's get-togethers and parties, and I didn't know who he was back then, that he
Yeah.
would turn into some major movie star now.
I wonder the following year, IGN sold to Fox for 650 million. That must have
Yeah,
really annoyed you.
well, that's one of the things where we're like, yeah, maybe we sold a little too early. But
Yeah.
at the same time, I wasn't really annoyed by it because I also have some shares in IGN after the sale. So it was more like double dipping.
You left and you kept on saying that you wanted to find life balance, but you didn't really stop. You ended up founding your own two startups, were popular also during book teller, movies with butter. What was behind you wanting to do all these different things? Was it the entrepreneurial itch that hasn't been scratched yet? What drove it?
Um, I didn't want to lose my skills as a web developer. And at the time, I was also working from home. So I thought I should create these websites just to keep my skills going.
What was your view in terms of where would your career go?
Well, after I left IGN, I was mainly focused on starting a family. So I moved back to
Yeah.
Sacramento, started a family, and spent time with family.
We've spent so much of this time talking about Rotten Tomatoes, but to put in perspective, you left in 2007, which is almost 2 decades ago, which is a long time. Do you still feel very attached to Rotten Tomatoes? I ask this because I often wonder, for many people, you have a successful startup that might have happened 2 decades ago, and that's all you're ever known for. How do you feel about that? Do you feel like, oh, I wish people knew I have done so much more and achieved so much more in life? Or are you very happy that your identity is so intrinsically tied to Rotten Tomatoes?
I actually feel really lucky because most companies fail. So having a successful one and being able to feel success, I feel really lucky. I don't mind being a one-hit wonder at all.
What does success feel like?
I think it's just one of those things where being Asian, they're always comparing. Because I remember my dad, when he was in Vietnam, I think he went to elementary school and they kicked him out after that. That is really tough because most families just couldn't afford it. My dad was like, hey, we gotta go to the US where they can go to school and there's not as much stress from Asian parents constantly like, hey, you should do this, you should do that.
What would your biggest regret be?
That's a tough one. It's hard to say because I feel like everything you go through, you learn from. I think my biggest regret is because I'm not a very sociable person, maybe not being able to express to people how much I appreciate them. Like how much I appreciate Roger Ebert talking about Rotten Tomatoes in the media, all for free, just because he's like, oh, I like this website.
Did you ever
No,
get to meet him, get to know him
oh yeah, I
better?
got to meet him a few times, but I wish I'm able to tell him how much I appreciate him, doing all these things. Or even the film critics that I met, how much of a fan I am of theirs, just reading their reviews. But being not a super sociable person is not being able to communicate that to them, like, hey, I really appreciate what you guys do.
Just before we wrap up, I feel as though you're an example of someone who basically just have an interest, a passion, and you went for it. And thankfully it worked out. And there's this eternal debate of should you follow your passion, go all in, or should you not and work on something that brings a stable job? What are your views on that, given how your career has panned out?
I'm able to follow my passion and to become successful at it, but you also hear a lot of stories of people who weren't successful at it. So I think there's no one path, you definitely can shoot for it. I also hear about people who are like, no, I don't really like programming, but it brings in a lot of money and I'm able to support my lifestyle. Like I really wanted to be a computer animator, but it didn't quite work out.
But you got
And
to work with the movie studios at least.
yeah, I get to do some animation for Disney Channel. And then I get to create Rotten Tomatoes.
Do you feel like through this entire journey, Sen, that you have found your why?
Yeah, I feel like it. Again, Asian parents are always comparing. I, I remember it was a big thing with me going to Berkeley, it being a well-respected school. And when I first came out and I started these companies with Patrick and Steven, and because it was a startup, we weren't paying ourselves much. My parents are constantly comparing me to my cousins. I overheard one of my uncles say, see, even though he went to Berkeley, look at him. He's not able to pay the bills.
Was there a point where you felt like your parents were finally proud of you and what you had achieved?
I think they're pretty proud. But I don't think they're any less critical.
There's always someone better.
Yeah, they're like, man, during the housing boom, your cousins invested in real estate and are so successful right now. Why didn't you do that? And I was just like, come on.
I created Rotten Tomatoes. The whole world knows about this.
Yeah.
What kind of legacy do you want to leave behind?
There's nothing wrong with being a one-hit wonder.
I love
I mean,
that.
creating anything successful is really hard. The odds are really against you. So you can be successful at even one of these. I feel like that's good enough.
And what do you think are the most important qualities of a successful person?
Well, I work crazy hours. I remember someone asked the CEO of NVIDIA about his work-life balance. He said something like, well, when I'm working, I'm working. When I'm not working, I'm thinking about working. When I go watch a movie, I'm thinking about working. I don't even know what movie I just saw. I was like, yeah, that was pretty much me when doing these startups. But when I'm watching movies, I'm definitely watching movies. Or
Thankfully, your
watching,
work was movies.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So I think hard work is one of them, liking what you're doing. Because when times are tough, if you love what you do, or you like working with the people that you work with, they'll pull you through the tough times.
And where can people go to find out what you are up to right now, Sen?
I actually like to be kind of private. So
Even though you have a blog.
I barely updated my blog for, I don't know, over 10 years. I haven't tweeted for a while.
You shared quite a lot. You were like, oh, I don't want Google to take over my phone. So the first thing I did was get rid of their search bar.
Yeah. I still remember those times when I work all the time. So I'm
Mm.
just trying my best to have a good work-life balance and be there for my kids, at least try as best as I can.
Anything else just before we wrap up?
You know, being successful in life can go a lot of ways. There's not just one way. If one door closes, open another door and go with the flow. I mean, my dream after college was to become a PIXAR animator, but that didn't go my way, and I ended up creating Rotten Tomatoes. Find something that you love to do, go for it, keep on striving. And don't forget, about your kids.
And that was the end of the episode. I hope you've enjoyed it. If you'd like to learn more about this episode, just head over to solismy.com. Please do head over to YouTube if you haven't done so already and leave a comment if you've enjoyed it. I'll see you next Sunday.